Good morning, good afternoon, good day, wherever you are. I'm going to start this for people who have tuned in way too early. Like that. There we go.
Make some money off of YouTube. So anyway, if you get a chance, that'd be great.
Hey there, good morning everyone. It's 10 o'clock here at the Googleplex in Mountain View, and my name is Dan Russell, and we're going to get started here in about a minute or two. This is a little bit of preamble to let people connect and get wired up and stuff. But in the meantime, what I'm going to do is sort of check to make sure all the systems are working. It looks to me as though the sound is working great, or at least as far as I can tell by the instrumentation that I have. Let me double check this to make sure this is all working right. That looks good. And I can't quite tell how many people we've got here. We've got 12 viewers connected live, which is great. So let me get started a little bit with the introduction. My name is Dan Russell. I'm an Uber Tech Lead at Google, and my focus area is on how people search and what they do when they search, what they don't do when they search, and how we can all become better searchers. And so I was asked today by the folks from the Manitoba Bar Association if I wouldn't give you a little bit of background, a little bit of skills on how to become a fabulous Google searcher. That's what we're going to do today. My plan is to take about the next 45 minutes or so to sort of go through a bunch of stuff about how to be a better searcher, how to know what some of those skills are, and I'll be demonstrating that. Now, as we go through this, I'll be going some live demonstration of lots of slides, and I'll make all these slides available to you afterwards if you'd like them. But what I want you to notice is if you're interested, you can pose questions to me in the group chat, which is the window on the far right-hand side. So if you want to ask a new question, you just click on that green button down there, and you'll be able to pose the question. And if I can see it and I can respond to it reasonably, I shall. And very least, I'll very much try to get to everything by the end of the time we have together. So having said that, my plan is to spend about 45 minutes or so going through my materials, and then we'll take some questions. I'll open up some questions that I have for you, and we'll see how it goes from there. All right? So what I'm going to do is go away. I'm going to go to my presentation mode, get things started, and if you have questions, go ahead and pose a new question, and I'll see if I can do something with that. All right? Let's get started. I'm going to switch to my screen share mode. Pay no attention to that flashing for a moment. And let's start. Okay? So here's the way I want to start. I want to start by giving you a couple of great ideas of things that we can do. So the very first one is probably the thing that I believe most people don't know much about, and that is what's called search by image. Now, I know you know about image search. This is not quite the same thing. Search by image allows you to take an image, say the picture of this lobster here, drag it into Google's image search box, and it will search for that image for you. Now, in particular, from a legal perspective, this is really handy if you want to find out whether or not someone is infringing on copyright for this image, or just for historical interest, where does this thing come from? It looks kind of like an older picture, but what happens here is you go to Google Images, and you see that little camera icon there in the search box? There's a camera icon and there's a microphone icon. The camera icon tells you that you can drag a picture, drop a picture into this image box, and it will search for it. So you see on the right-hand side, I've got an illustration of my desktop, and those are some pictures that I've got on my desktop. And what I can do is drag them into the search box, and it will search for me. So for example, here's a nice picture that was taken by my office mate. And he was very proud of it, but he truthfully couldn't quite remember where it was from. He knew he was somewhere in the American Southwest, but that was kind of the end of it. So he did that, drag it into the search box, or you can upload the file. And what he can do is then discover, in this case, where it's from. You can see here that it's from the Red Rock Canyon area of Nevada. That's just outside of Las Vegas. So you can tell what he was doing when he was in Las Vegas. Let me show that to you live here. Okay, so let me stop my screen sharing real quick. What I want to do is go back to my, I do want to do screen sharing, but I want to switch, sorry about that. What I do want to do is switch to the other window here. So here I've got regular Google search. What I'm going to do is go to images. I'm going to click on this corner right here, which brings up my image search. Now, remember I said you've got the camera icon? Okay, you see that? What I can do now is click that. Now, rather than show you how to drag it, I'm going to show you how to upload an image. So this is uploading an image from my desktop. So I go to Upload Image, click on Choose File, and now here I've got on my desktop something called Search by Image folder. Now here you see the various things we've got here, but what I want to show you is that red rocks image that we just looked at a second ago. Now if I open that image, it's going to transfer that picture to Google, uploading the file, and you can see here, there in fact is where that picture was taken, Red Rock Canyon National Conservation Area in Nevada. This is immensely handy. So what I want you to understand is that this is one of those things where it's a kind of capability that changes the way you think. Sorry, I want to make sure I get this little hide thing off here. So let's go back to this. Okay, now you got the idea here? The way this is supposed to work is you have an image, you drag it in. But will this work with all images? Not quite. Let me show you cases in when it will work and what cases when it won't work. Okay? So let's go back to my screen here. Here's my slide deck. Here's an image of something that I found in my basement. Now, do you have any idea what this is? I didn't. So what I did in this case is I took a picture of it on a white black background. That's the picture you're seeing here. Okay? I took my little cell phone, took a picture, uploaded it to my computer, and then I did that same trick of moving it into Google Image Search. Now, in this case, I dragged it into the image search box, and it shows me almost instantly that what this actually is a foam pail wrench. Now, you probably don't know what a foam pail wrench is. I didn't either. It's actually the wrench that firefighters use when they're opening the giant bucket suds, which is what they use to suppress fires. So it's a specialized tool that I don't know how I would have described it for a regular search. This is one of the beauties about search by image, is that you can search for things that you could not understand or understand how to ask for. Here's another example. I'm going to do a couple examples here because each of these has a particular twist to it that I want you to pick up on. So the point with the foam pail wrench is that you could take that image, put it on a white background, because there are lots and lots of product placement catalogs that have products on a white background, just isolated, and that's what makes that trick work. Here's a more difficult case. Here, this is a true story. I saw this caterpillar racing toward me one day while sitting on a park bench. I pulled out my phone and took a photograph of it, and that's what we see here. So again, I dragged and dropped that into the image search box like that, and in this case, that's not good enough. There are too many yellow and black things in the world. Bumblebees, cars, baseball teams, everything. So what I had to do is add a couple of extra words. In this case, I'm describing what the thing is. I'm helping image search. You see what I'm saying? You can do image search. It's fantastic. It's powerful. It's wonderful. But sometimes you got to add in a word or two to give it a little bit of extra help. Okay? Now, one of the really great things you can also do is explore the space of tools that are within Google. So in particular, one of the things you can do here is to use the image color filtering tools, and I'll show you how to do that in a second, but I can look for particular kinds of images and filter by color. Why is this important? Here's the case. Suppose you're working on some money laundering case, and you remember that there's a book about Money laundering, that was wonderful. It was something about Southeast Asia. That's all you remember. Is that a query? No, it's not. You'll spend the rest of your days trying to figure out what that book is. But human psychology is wonderful because what you can do is recognize something very, very easily. So here I've gone to Google Images and typed in the simple query, money laundering book. Let me tell you, most books covers have been scanned and they're in Google Images. So here I've done money laundering book because I know I'm looking for a book about money laundering, but I also remember that it's orange. This is the kind of thing, this is the kind of way human memory works, is it's not exactly super indexical and organized and logical the way you think you'd like to be. You're not that way. So what happens is that you can say, pull down the color menu, and that's what we're seeing here. Select orange, that little tab you see there, pointed to by the red arrow, and then you can recognize very quickly that book, Legal Aspects of Money Laundering in Malaysia. Oh, that was it. That was the thing I was looking for. You see what I'm trying to get across is that sometimes it's difficult to specify exactly all the details, maybe the ISBN number because nobody remembers that stuff, but it's easy to recognize something if you can get roughly into the right space. This is one technique for getting into the right space, using that color filtering technique. Now, one of the great things about that image recognition, search by image trick, is that you can put in amazing images, but it doesn't always work. So, for example, it's clear to you and I what's going on here. If I drag this image into my image recognition search engine, I would expect it to tell me where that building is, but it can't. The reason is there are too many things going on here. Sometimes you just got to limit the search problem. So in this case, by cropping this image down to the obvious logo, don't bother cropping it to the trees, don't bother cropping it to the asphalt, but crop it to the logo like this, and then do a search. That search will then come up with not only that it's the logo for this particular location in Northern California, but if you scroll down a little bit, here's the street address as well. Okay? This is one of the great tricks because if you can limit it to a specific icon, a specific kind of recognizable entity, then you can often discover things that would be otherwise impossible to figure out. Somebody from the police force in southern states in the United States recently wrote to me and said that they had figured out a crime based on recognizing a single graffiti tag. Now, what they had done was to take a picture of the entire wall, but that doesn't work because there are too many tags, too many things going on simultaneously. If, in fact, you can limit it to a single, probably distinguishable item like this, then you have a hope. Okay. So, we've been talking thus far about two major ideas, one of which is limiting your search to something that you can recognize. That's kind of an advanced technique because you're not exactly sure what it is you're looking for, but you'll recognize it when you see it. The other is using the image search by image feature. Okay. One thing that I use a lot, and I recommend to all my professional researchers, is use Google Alerts. Now, if you use this, bear with me for just a second. For people who don't, this will change your life. It will rock your world. What I mean by Google Alerts here is the ability to make a query that effectively gets run every day. So in essence, what you're doing is monitoring the web for new content. You can have it digested, you look at only news results or only stuff that shows up on the web or video or whatever. You can select all these different options and create a standing query. So for example, one thing I do is I have an alert set up to track all of the mentions of the word Google in the site known as businessweek.com. So this is, I'm just targeting that one site. And we'll go into this site colon stuff later, but I wanted to give you the idea how to use it. Because what we're doing here is I can set up an alert to monitor all of the changes on a particular site. Later I'll show you how to monitor multiple sites all at once. But this is the kind of thing that's incredibly useful if you're trying to, for example, follow a particular business over time, or a particular topic of interest to you. If you're particularly interested in, I don't know, some particular aspect of the law in, the eastern provinces, you can then check out what's going on in Nova Scotia or Quebec or something like that. You could monitor just those sites and not have to crawl through everything that's out there at once. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that oftentimes people will do a search, and you've probably noticed this yourself. You do a simple search like crabapple or name your favorite query. And you can see here you've got about 1.08 million results. Now the good news is you don't have to look through that. We go to a lot of trouble to make sure we bring the best results up to the top. Okay? Now, notice this. You have to understand that the number of results is an estimate. Keep repeating that to yourself. It's an estimate. It's an estimate. The reason I'm making such a big deal about this is I've seen people make arguments, including legal arguments, based on the number of results on a particular query. And that's probably not the best way to do that. Here's an example. Crabapple gives me 1 million results. Now, if I add more terms, the way we normally think about these things is that we add in those additional terms, and the number of results should go down because there are fewer web pages about crabapple pie recipes. True enough, now we only have 73,000. But watch this. If I add even more words in here, like best, all of a sudden I get 10,000 more results. Now that's very counterintuitive. Let me give you an idea for what's going on. First off, the number of results that we put up there in the top really is an estimate. Because we can't actually count them all, we have a little algorithm that estimates from various properties of the indices roughly how many results there are. Second thing is that sometimes when you add in fourth or fifth or sixth term, the number of results gets quite small. And when it gets small like that, in essence, basically what Google does is to start to work harder. It will actually then go into more distant index files that it's got and start to pull up content from that. So remember that. Now, I wanted to show another kind of thing that's, I think, really interesting and potentially useful in your line of work, and that's Google Trends. Like Google Alerts, if you've already used Google Trends, that's great, but I'm going to show you something that you might not know about. Google Trends is basically our tool that looks at the space of queries that are being made worldwide, aggregates them, anonymizes the content, and then shows you trends. So when I took this particular image, the World Cup was a really big deal. It was trending now. Obviously then ESPN, the NBA draft, and those were the top topics in May of 2014. Okay. What this does is it aggregates over the whole world, but there's something very nice one can do with this. In essence, what it's doing is it's looking at search volumes over specific regions and categories and so on. Now, how do you get to Google Trends? See that thing in blue, in the square brackets? That's the query you would use to get to Google Trends. Yes, I could give you the URL, and I won't. You should not remember URLs. You should remember how to search for it. This is a big lesson from today. Google has way too many tools, way too many pieces of content, way too many different kinds of resources for you to remember or even bookmark all of the URLs. So when in doubt, look it out. Look for the results. Look for the kind of thing by using, in this case, Google Trends to find the trends. And once you do that, you'll end up with something like this. Now, what you can do is in the very top box is you can add comma-separated terms. In this case, I use the terms flu, influenza, and it creates a graph, which is what we see here. What we see is a graph over the past several years showing the relative queries for the word flu versus the word influenza. Why should you care? Couple big ideas here. First off, you can see things like trends in flu over time, but more importantly, I think for lawyers and for legal research, is that you can look at and gauge the relative importance and commonality of terms. You can see here that yes, influenza is a term, and it's used about 10 times less than the word flu. So if you're trying to look for terms that people will understand, You can use this to estimate how frequently people use them to search for something. That is, you're in essence measuring how often they think about that as a term with respect to questions they have. Okay? You can easily imagine, for example, in automotive cases, that there are certain kinds of ideas and concepts and terms that people would use that are uncommon and not well recognized. So think about that. Trends also has a lot of interesting kinds of capabilities. So, for example, here I've done a query for tennis, football, basketball, baseball. And you can see here that, well, in North America, that red line is football. Now, hold on a second. What this is doing is you can see the map there. You can see North America, United States, Canada. You can see UK over on the right-hand side, and Australia, and a few other. The color intensity reflects the number of queries being generated. So for football, Australia, no surprise there. Okay. But what's fascinating here is we can now drill down. So we can now start to filter these groups by their region. That's what the limits on the left-hand side are. You can limit to just web search or whatever you want. You can select particular regions. Not in this case, I'm showing you worldwide, but in a moment I'll show you just Canada. You can then filter on time and categories and so on. There's a wealth of information here. I could do an entire hour just on Google Trends, but I won't. I will let you explore that on your own. But I wanted to give you a sense that there's huge capability here if you'd like to explore it. So here now, I've done the query comparing hockey and football because I know how you feel about hockey. So what's interesting here is the red term here is football. Now, obviously what's going on is that football can't be that popular in the world. Well, it is. It's also conflated with soccer, but let's not go there, because what I want to do next is to drill down just into Canada and see regional interest. And here, of course, it reverses. Football is still a big deal, but hockey is now the red term. It comes out on top. And another thing that's interesting about trends is you can see, obviously, the cyclical nature of sports. You can see double peaks for most years. And in particular, if you look at the far right-hand side, you look at February 2014. What happened? Canadian hockey. Well, of course, Sochi happened, right? The greatest sweep of non-defeats, of pure victories in the Olympic history of hockey. So you can see this kind of stuff very, very easily. Now, that's trends. I wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about sort of the flip of that, which is something this is a fairly advanced operation, a fairly advanced tool, but some of you might find this useful. What it is it's called Google Correlate. Again, don't search for the URL, just search for Google Correlate, and it will tell you what that is. What Google Correlate is, it's just like trends, except it will tell you other terms that are correlated with that query term. So here I've done the query skiing. And what it's telling me is other terms right below it: alpine ski, Nordic skiing, ski shops, snowmobiling, etc. Those are all, guess what, highly correlated in terms of time with a single query skiing. Okay? Now this is kind of interesting because you can start to see the constellations of things that go together. What's motivating people's interest in this particular topic, in this particular area of discourse? You can see those things changing together. But Correlate also has something more, which is that you can start to shift things by time. In this case, I've shifted everything 25 weeks, that is 6 months later. And I did the search to correlate the term skiing with other query terms. And you can see Colorado camping, canoe trips, whitewater rafting, all these summertime activities, right? Now, why am I bringing this up? Because you can, in this case, we're looking for anti-correlates, things that are shifted by 6 months. Okay, so if you tried to look for the correlation between these two, they would be 0, right? Because they'd be totally opposite in time. But now we can start to see how topics shift over time. So, for example, there might be things that happen, say, 2 weeks after one event, and you can start to pick this up here. For people who are interested in these kinds of correlations, this is a powerful, powerful tool that has a lot of different capabilities. and I suggest you spend time looking just in this area. There's some nice help material to help you figure out how to use Google Correlate. So we've seen a few tools, and I'm kind of skipping around a little bit, but I want to give you this sense for the richness of Google in ways that you might not have thought about it. So you know, for example, that there's google.ca and google.com in the US. Now, as you probably know, there are, for each major language, each major country, a different Google. So here I'm showing you the Google of our neighbors to the south, in Mexico, and Saudi Arabia's Google. And there are multiple kinds of Googles. This is interesting when you're trying to work with people who come from a different background than you, or you're trying to do research about what's going on in another country. For example, South Africa not only has Google, but it has it in multiple languages. So there's the Afrikaans Google, the Zulu Google, the Xhosa Google, and so on. Belgium, of course, is multiple languages all in one country. Now, the way to think about this from your perspective is, how do you find information from those other languages? Suppose you're working with, say, immigrants from some country. You would like to understand what the context is for a particular set of beliefs from that country. You would want to use the Google for that country, right? And then, of course, if you use that other language search in that country's Google, then you'll start to see the kinds of things that come along with that cultural milieu. Okay? For example, the easy example here is to use Google India, because it's offered in Hindi, Bengali, Telugu, and so on. Okay? So what you would do here is to search for google.co.in. But be careful, because not all Google names follow that pattern. Sometimes it's something else. Okay? But in this case, when we switched to the Hindi version in google.co.in, we can now do our query. In this case, I did the query Eurozone. And I want to see what's going on in the Hindi version of Google, representing, reflecting what's being said in Hindi. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is this is not, the world is not dominated by English, it's not dominated by French, it's not even dominated by Chinese. It's in fact an interesting melange of all these things. And we learn more and we grow by understanding the cultural context of Google whatever that country is a great way to get into the mind space of people from that country. So there are a lot of them to try, and it's worth paying attention to them. Of course, the obvious way to figure it out is Google South Africa, Google Indonesia, whatever, and it will tell you it's google.co.id or .bt or whatever it is. Okay. So there's the pattern to use: Google space country, Google Tasmania, whatever it is you want to do, and will direct you to the right place, because not all of them are google.co.in. Some are Google.Ghana, unfortunate line break there, google.com.gh. Some are just the country code at the top, so google.rw for Rwanda. Okay? Now, caution, it's not possible to search in all these domains. Like Bhutan does not have its own, Mayotte does not have its own. But you can use the site operator, we'll get to this later, to search just the Mayotte YT domains, or site BT to search just Bhutanese domains. Again, we'll come back to this later, but I want to give you the sense that it is possible to search for just the Bhutanese perspective on this, and we'll use that country code to do that. So, why might you care? Well, I guess it's obvious, right? The news, the world, the perspectives, the trends are very different depending on where you stand. And this is one way. For example, I'm just showing you news here. What are the top stories in this particular day for India versus US? Very, very different. There is no overlap between the top news stories in these two countries, right? Now, when you're doing these queries, what you're doing usually is you're typing things into the Google search box, right? Now, one of the things I want to tell you is that when you're choosing your query terms, you have to choose terms that you expect to find on the destination pages. In other words, it's not about the terms that you as a professional know. It's about terms that will be on a web page written by somebody in that particular domain. Okay? You know many, many terms of art for legal concepts, right? This is sort of your stock and trade. But people who write about this, say the public perception of provincial law, might not use those same terms. And so you have to figure out what they're using. Now, one thing to notice about this, some things matter, some things don't matter. Capitalization does not matter. The one exception here is when you're doing or, like mesothelioma or lung disease, right? Those are, you would separate that by the term or, and that has to be capitalized. That's sort of the only case where capitalization really, really matters. Now, what does matter is that diacritical characters do matter sometimes, usually. I'm sorry about this, but what's going on is that, for example, when you have the accented vowels, the accent AQ, or those will often match regardless because we have robust pattern matching. However, some characters really do make a difference and we can't match across them. So, for example, here's Morton spelled with a plain old O. Here's Morton spelled with a /O. You see the results are very, very different. These are different people, different results, different concepts. Here's Morton spelled with a ring on the A. It's pronounced kind of the same. Again, totally, totally different. So in this case, the diacritical characters often do matter. So when you're searching, one of the things to consider is, in particular for given names, try it with the diacritical characters typed properly, that is, with the accent, and try it without, because some people will do it with and some people do it without, and so you want to have complete coverage. And as a word to the wise, try both variant spellings in order to be able to see what all the possibilities are. Umlauts are particularly problematic. Non-Germanic speaking peoples tend to ignore the umlauts, or they put in arbitrary umlauts. Now, capitalization doesn't matter. Special characters do matter, but some special characters don't matter. Oh no. So diacritical characters do matter with respect to spelling, but special characters like curly brace, the paragraph symbol, the square brackets, those kinds of things, they do not matter with respect to queries. So here, for example, I show you two queries. Google X projects with the square brackets, which is the way we spell it here, and without the square brackets, as you see on the right. Right. So you got the idea here. We've got this immense capability, and we're kind of constantly growing this kind of capability. So one of the capabilities I want to talk about was language translation. Now, you probably know the state of the art of computer-assisted language translation is not, shall we say, literature quality. It's a little rough and ready sometimes, but it's worth knowing that Romance-to-Romance language translations tend to work out pretty well. So French to German, German to Dutch, English to Italian, that kind of stuff. That works reasonably well. Yes, I know English is not a Romance language, but you get the idea. But what's interesting here is that what we can do is, if you use Google Translate as a tool, you can often have access to things. Now, in legal issues, you will definitely want to get a careful translation made, a real professional translation made. In terms of searching, it's often really handy to know that you can take individual terms like this and translate it. Now, remember, the farther afield you go from the Romance languages, the more difficult it gets. So, for example, searching in Turkish, which is an agglomerative language with a lot of different tenses we don't have in English, is a much more difficult case. On the other hand, sometimes you can have access to material that you would never, ever get otherwise. For example, this is a Japanese J-pop singer whose music I like, but I don't know how to spell her name. So I typed in this case my best approximation of Tsuchi Ayano, and it spell corrected it to the correct Romanji typing of her name, and sure enough, I now have access to all of her material. Now this is in English, but the point is that this capability, while not great for literature, allows me to see material and content that I would never have had access to before. Now, on this same sort of cross-cultural theme, I want to open your eyes to something you might not have thought about. That is Wikipedia. Yes, I know you thought about Wikipedia, but here's something interesting. Okay, here are two versions of the Wikipedia article on Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, the one in English is on the right-hand side, and it's basically, it's okay. On the left is the translated version of the Italian language article on Wikipedia. I'm telling this to you because they're very different. They have very different cultural stances on Wikipedia's representation of Leonardo. So here, for example, I'm just going to scroll up a little bit and show you what the bottom of this looks like. Yes, the English Wikipedia entry on Leonardo da Vinci is stunted at best. There are 8.5K words in English in the Wikipedia article. There are 23,000 words in Italian. What's going on here? Well, here what I've done is I'm showing you how to use the language translation tool in Google to automatically translate the Wikipedia Italian entry. The reason I wanted to tell you this is the kind of thing that sophisticated searchers will sometimes do. They will look for different perspectives on the same story. It's a little bit like second sourcing or third sourcing your reference. Here, Wikipedia actually is much richer than you might think, especially when you start to consider the constellation of articles across different languages. So here, this is wonderful because the entire biography section, just the one single biography section of the Leonardo article in Italian, is longer than the entire English article in Leonardo. The Italians really care about Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, so I bring this up as an example of the ability that good searchers have when they're searching for tools. Now, one of the things to remember is when you're searching, you're not only searching for content, that is web pages or data sets or whatever, but sometimes the right tool will help you immensely. For example, suppose you're writing an article about a recent air disaster, and this is one of these things that comes up all the time. I'm writing an article, I need help. There's a question about the integrity of the outside of the jet engine, but what's that thing called? Well, what would you do? Now, if you're older than 40, you would probably reach for a thesaurus. If you're younger than 30, you would go online and maybe ask your social media. But let me give you another idea, and that is that when you're in a situation like this, you should think, what's a tool that could help me out? Okay? Because one way to do this is to search for a thing called a reverse dictionary. Now, I know most of you have probably not used a reverse dictionary, but they're immensely handy tools to have. Okay? Now, reverse dictionaries are just what you think. If a dictionary has a word on the left and a definition on the right, a reverse dictionary has a definition on the left and the word on the right. In essence, it's like a lookup thesaurus. It's a powerful thesaurus that takes words as the query and looks up entries in the dictionary that use those words. Let me show you an example. So when you do a search for the tool reverse dictionary, there's a ton of them. They all show up there. They're great. Okay? So I'm just going to choose one arbitrarily. I'll say let's use the one-look dictionary. It usually shows up at the top. You click through on it, and you get this window that you see on the bottom right, where I used the query terms jet engine housing streamlined, whatever. You can do whatever your own thing is. And then it shows you definitions that appear in the dictionary that use those terms. And remember what we did with the orange book on money laundering? We recognized it. Ah, that's right. Number 2, nacelle. That's the word I'm looking for. Okay? So you can see here, this is a cool tool. Reverse dictionaries are great. More importantly, I want you to remember the idea that sometimes you're looking for a tool and not just the data itself. Okay? For example, another kind of thing you might want to search for when you're looking, for example, for evidence that a particular system is not being used well, or hanky-panky that's going on in, say, institutional levels and so on. One of the things you might do is to say, well, if I do a Google search for this, it's probably not going to work out, because who would put that information out there? Well, let me tell you, LISTSERVS, the old-fashioned email technology for email distribution lists. Aha! If you're searching for information about how people are actually using, say, that mail system or that financial accounting system, a listserv of people talking about that system is often a great place to go pick up some ideas. How would you search for that? List of listservs. So that pattern, list of X, where X could be whatever, is handy to remember. List of archival newspapers, list of whatever. Okay? Here I'm showing you the idea behind list of listservs, because all of a sudden now with this you can find a tool which allows you to go deeply into the repository of knowledge captured on listservs that's there for you to now you can search over that. Okay. Now I have to pause here for just a moment and point out that I actually have about 150 slides here, and at this rate we'll be here for another 3.5 hours. So I'm going to slightly accelerate things, but I can't resist talking about this first, okay, which is the fundamental skill. Now I don't know how many of you know about how to use Control-F or Command-F, but this is one of these things that I find that knowledge of it is very, very unevenly distributed. So let's imagine the following scenario. Does the California Vehicle Code regulate the use of pocket bikes on roads? Okay, yes or no, simple yes or no question. What I would do, and I've sat with people while they did this, so I know what happens, is that they will search for California Vehicle Code like that. And they'll end up on this gigantic document, which this particular section is 65 pages long. Now, what a lot of people will do at this point is they'll start scrolling through this line at a time, and that's crazy. Don't do that, okay? Know, and keep this in your heart of hearts, because it's something you definitely need to know, is how to use for Command-F. That is, text find on a web document, okay? This is a web page. This is legal information for the California Vehicle Code. What I would do is now do a Control-F, and you see in the upper right corner where it says pocket bike in blue, I've typed a Command-F or a Control-F depending, and typed in pocket bike, and it's jumped to this point, section 473. Okay? This is important because it reduces the amount of time you spend wading through documents tremendously. If you don't know this, don't be embarrassed. 90% of the universe of internet using people does not know this. Okay? But now, if you're in the blessed 10%, all of a sudden you're a lot faster. You're a lot faster. Okay? Now, this is the way you do it. If you're on a Macintosh, it's Command-F. It works within the scope of any web document. And I will tell you, if you're on the other kind of computer, you can use a Control-F, same operation. I will tell you that this radically changes the way you search, the way you think. It also works in almost every application known to humanity. It works in PowerPoint, works in Acrobat, probably works on whatever interesting word processing application you have in your office. Okay? Now, if you're in Chrome, the Chrome browser from Google, what it will do is actually highlight on the right-hand side those little yellow lines. This is every place where the search term sale appears in this segment of the California Vehicle Code. Okay? So you have mentions of sale at the top and at the very bottom, and not so much in between, just an occasional mention. This is really useful when you're looking for things like people's names, organization names, or in this case, just the concept as it appears in the document. Now, for example, just as an illustration here, how many times does this word appear in the King James Bible? I'm showing this to you. I'm going to show you a quick video here as an illustration of this idea. So let me run this video, and this will not work well over the video conference, but you'll get the idea. Here, what I'm doing is in real time trying to answer this question. How many times does the word behold appear? It's simple. What I'm doing is I'm downloading the entire full text of King James Bible. In this case, I've gone to Project Gutenberg. I've downloaded the full text. Once I've done that, I say behold. You see in the upper right-hand corner? And as we watch, it fills in all of the yellow marks on the right-hand side. There are 1,300 some odd numbers of that word appearing in the King James Bible. If you know that little tool, if you are competent in understanding how these things work, then all of a sudden you have a very different perspective. Now, there are various things you can do. If you're interested, I'll let you look this up later. Turns out there's a regular expression generation mechanism to allow you to search for multiple terms. In online documents, you can search for things like dates and so on. I do want to focus in on some interesting advanced features, but I'm going to jump from here forward probably 100 slides. First one I want to tell you is the tool of searching your own search history. So this is one URL you have to remember, google.com/history. So if you have enabled your personal history tracking, that is, the history of searches you've done, what this allows you to do is to search over your own searches. Okay? Why would you want this? Well, I don't know about you, but in this case, I often will remember that I solved this problem once before. I'm, say, looking for a whooping cough vaccine bit of research that I did. And if I would just search in my web history, that is my search history, I can find every time I did that in the past. So this allows me then to go through and remember the best of the things that I've done before. You can also do all kinds of things with statistics and personal quantified self and all that stuff. But if you've got it turned on, you can now use the full power of Google to search for, for example, Geological Survey or USGS. Here again, I'm using capital OR. Okay. Now, I'm going to jump forward a little bit because here I'm on slide 62, and I want to go to, well, not there. I want to go forward to 108. Yes, I know, I'm skipping over lots of stuff, but this is, there's a bunch of fun stuff here, and you can look at the slides later. This is the kind of thing right here you really want to be walked through real quick. Now, there's an important idea here, which is that there are Google search operators, okay? What I mean by that is that there are a lot of operators like OR, capital OR, or double quote to group words together, or things like file type, colon, site, colon, in URL, and so on. There are a lot of these. I'll give you a link to a tip sheet at the very end. You can go look all this up in detail. Okay? But let me illustrate this by asking you a couple questions. Suppose your brother is a teacher at a local high school and needs to find a lesson plan for a unit on superconducting materials. How would you find that lesson? Okay? Think about this for a second. What you're trying to do is find a particular kind of document. Now, Google helps out here by giving you this operator called file type. See where I've bolded it in blue there in the center? So when I do the query superconductor high school, I can then say file type colon PPT. I could say or PPTX, but you get the idea. I'm looking for what? A presentation, a PowerPoint. And we can actually search for any file extension. PDF, XSL, and so on. All these different file types appear as web documents, and now you can limit your search to just that. Incredibly handy. If you're trying to find, for example, data sets, you often will want to say file type colon DAT or CSV, something like that. Okay, now, so that's file type. That's one key operator. I want to tell you the second key operator here, which is searching within a particular site. So, for example, somebody said that I had been quoted in the New York Times. How would you find that? Here's one way. You would use the site colon operator. Okay, remember, file type says only search for files of this kind, this type. Site colon says only search within this particular site. Okay, so searching for my name, site colon nytimes.com. Now this is particularly handy because here I use double quotes, the operator's double quote, to surround my name, because I know the convention for the New York Times writing guide is to use the full name plus middle initial. Okay. So they use that convention, I use that to my advantage, and I say search in that location, in that site, for my name. Okay. Now, here's a particular Canadian gotcha. Okay. One of the things that people often do, especially in the States, is they will say site:.edu, and meaning that they're searching for educational institutions, universities, and so on. Gotcha. That doesn't work for Canada. In fact, it doesn't work for most of the world. It's kind of a mistake that people, it's kind of an error, a common error that people mistake. So for example, if you do .edu, then your query, like site:.edu journalism, you'll find United States journalism departments that are in schools, edu. Okay? If you wanted to do, say, University of Toronto, you would want to say site:/utoronto.ca, capital OR for OR, space site:/umanitoba.ca, etc., etc. Right? That way, and there's another way to do that. If you look at my notes later, I'll tell you there's another nice way to show you how to do all the Canadian universities, but it's a little bit tricky, so we're not going to go into it right now. Okay, so this is really handy to search within a site. So, for example, we want to find all the mentions of this particular composer at the University of Maryland archives. Okay, so here are the archives. What I would do is this expression: site:/digitallib.umd.edu Hovannes. Now you see what's happening? It's searching inside that site for just those results. Okay. Now, you have to be a little careful with this, because a major mistake I see people do is that what they will do is over-limit. My friend Sean posted to Facebook, says, I wrote something for a major New York paper. I think it's the Times. It's not the Times. So in that case, what I had to do was to back off, drop the site:. So when you know it's in a site, use it, because it will save you a huge amount of time. Okay? And in fact, what I like to do is to show you this nice example here. So I'm going to go back to home. Now, suppose, for example, that what I want to do is to search for, say, a directory of the legal faculty at the University of Manitoba. So I'm going to use my site: trick. Well, let's look for University of Manitoba first. Okay. Now, here we go. We've got the University of Manitoba. The very first is website here. Okay. Now, one thing to notice is that this box right here, this is a relatively new feature. What this is doing is allowing you to do a site: search within the University umanitoba.ca website. So now I could say law school faculty directory. Okay, now I've got the results. No. No, I don't want to speak to my computer right now. That's another feature I can show you now some other time. But what's happened, you see up here, it has added site:/umanitoba.ca. Now, this worked handily for the University of Manitoba, but not all sites have it, so that was a particularly nice feature. So you can, if you see that in-site search box, but now you know how to do it. So this will, the site: trick works for any website. There we go. Okay, so we've got all of that. You can now do your searches. Now, I wanted to point out a sort of major thing here is, in addition to having site: operations and so on, we also support lots of filters and search tools. They're accessible by clicking on the search tools box that you see there. So, for example, I want to look for Mary Shapiro, work for the US SEC. I can limit it by time, so that becomes one kind of filter that you can do. You also have access to the advanced search user interface, which gives you a lot of this kind of stuff and a little bit more. So here, example, you can see I've done a search for site: Stanford edu, so just Stanford's website, for the term, the phrase coral bleaching, and what it does is it groups those words together. Okay, and now I click on the gear icon on the right-hand side. See that? advanced search, and that allows me to pop into this advanced user interface. This allows me to do all the stuff I talked to you about before without having to remember it. So how to use, for example, searches in different languages, how to search on particular file types, how to search on particular dates, and so on. So this is an incredibly handy thing to know. Now, this is the custom search engine I'm going to skip over because that's the solution how to solve the Canadian University problem. But what I want to do is skip forward to about here and talk about question answering for just a second. Okay. One of the things you can do is, let's run this and see if this works here. This is a video showing how to use voice search.
Who painted the Sistine Chapel?
Sistine Chapel ceiling was created by Michelangelo.
What is x squared plus y cubed? What is the electron configuration of lithium?
The electron configuration of lithium is He2S1.
Show me a picture of Guernica by Picasso.
Here you go. Some pictures related to Guernica.
What was the name of the dog on the Lewis and Clark expedition?
Okay, so it doesn't get that. But I wanted to make the bigger point that what's happening to Google, which actually happening to all the search engines, is that we're becoming increasingly competent and skilled in the ability to ask and answer arbitrary questions like this. So what we see happening is more that the base capability for is getting bigger and better all the time. So I want to leave you with a couple key ideas, and then we'll open it up for questions. So if you've got questions, go ahead and put them into the question app on the right-hand side, and I'll get to them. But I want to leave you with a couple key ideas. First off, when in doubt, search it out. And what I mean by that is searching for tools, searching for data sets, pose questions, even if you don't think that Google could do it, because, you know, one of the things we're constantly doing is making the underlying system richer, better, more competent. Okay? Now, bear in mind, because we have thousands of people here working on this every day, your search skills will become stale, and you don't want to get stuck with the search skills of stuff in 2012. You know? As a professional, one of your key advantages is the ability to research information quickly and accurately and efficiently. As new capabilities come online, you want to be able to take advantage of those and keep on top of things. One way I recommend you do that is to practice deliberately. I know your mother told you to practice the violin every day, and she was right. That's the only way to actually get better. So when you get the chance, it's worth trying a couple different alternative ways. So with quotes, without quotes, using cite, not using cite, and so on. And just notice the differences. You can pick up a lot just by looking. Now, I also teach classes on this, so it's been great to talk to you for an hour about this. But I have an online version of this, which is I have an advanced version and a basic version of power searching with Google. We have had over 500,000 students so far take it. And what's nice is that it's actually a pretty compelling class. It's a sequence of videos that you can watch at your leisure with little tests, little check activities for you to make sure you're understanding what's going on. And I think it's pretty interesting. We ask questions like this. So questions that are engaging and interesting, and use all the skills you've been working on. And best, we'll be running the next version of this coming up here in just a few weeks. I'm having a meeting about it this afternoon, and I hope we'll go live in just a couple of weeks. So watch for it. You can watch all the social media. I will be tweeting about it. I'll be Facebooking about it. I'll be G+ing about it. You name it, and I'll be trying to put up something about that. Okay. Like I said at the very end, I will give you some links here, and we can send out email to everybody with a link to this presentation, which will include then this link, which is sort of the one-page quick summary of all of the things I've talked about here, and a bunch more. If you want to practice things deliberately, I have another website called agoogleaday.com, which poses a few questions every day. It's worth trying in order just to try to figure out what's going on. And I would like some feedback from you. So if you've enjoyed this talk, or if you've learned something, or I haven't answered some questions, please feel free to let me know what kind of resources you use, what information maps you use, like reverse dictionary. And I love hard problems. I can't guarantee to do free consulting for everybody, but if you have a hard problem, I want to hear about it, especially if it's this kind of problem that you can't yet resolve with Google. Okay, here are some tip sheets. Those are sheets I did in previous years for investigative reporters and editors conference. My blog is searchresearch1.blogspot.com, and every week I pose a problem, which is one of these difficult problems, one of these challenges, and then we solve it. And it's an interesting, a wonderful community of people all working to understand these kinds of things. And that's it. It's 11:01, so it's 1 o'clock in Manitoba. I hope this has been useful. So let me see here. There are some interesting questions, but first I'm going to come over here to this computer and see what questions I've got. How do I vote for a favorite moment? Let's see here. Your alerts, great. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Ramon. Luis. Yeah, there are some things here that are difficult to use, but it's a lot better than it has been in the past. Okay. So I'm going to let's see here. Let me pop back. And I'm going to stop my screen share here. And come back and talk to you. There we go. So if anybody has any live questions now, any questions, you could put them either into the group chat, which I'm monitoring now, or post them over here in the questions app. Either way, I'll get that. Now, one thing to notice is that part of the issue about using Google Hangouts, like we're doing, fantastic. I can broadcast out. In fact, you can. You can broadcast out to thousands and thousands of people. But the problem is that it's a little bit slow in turnaround delay. So if you want to pose a question now and put it out there, that would be fantastic. Otherwise, what I'll do is, like I said, I'll send out the link to this presentation to the fine folks at Manitoba Bar Association, and we'll iterate on that. Okay. So let me switch back to here, and I'm going to pose a couple of quick questions as a way to get you going. So here are 3 questions I'm going to pose to you, and almost all of these are easily solvable. I'm going to do the second one just because it's fun. But the other 2 are easily solvable as well. I will give you a big hint. You can find a list of all the food banks by using the site colon operation. You have to figure out what domain you want to limit it to. And what legal news is on the front page of the Manitoba Gazette in 1887. You can do that by searching for the news archives from Google, or there are other places that provide that as well. But let's do the sunrise tomorrow in Yellowknife, just because it's fun. Okay, I'll come here. Now, one of the things to recognize is that, remember what I said about searching for tools? Okay. How to compute sunrise. Okay. Now, there are a lot of ways one can do this, but there are lots of calculators for this. So here's a sunrise calculator and so on. You should not actually work the algorithm yourself, because I don't know about you, but my celestial geometry is not that good. But the easiest way to do this is to do something like sunrise, yellow, right? And there you go. So that's the sunrise in Yellowknife, and if you click through, for example, on the first result, it will actually take you to a whole table where you can see how much sunrise is going to be later and later every day for the next, well, never mind. You get the idea. Okay, so I don't see any other new questions coming up. So I guess what I will do, let's see here. There's your best tip to get more people to use these valuable skills. Oh, from Mike. We must all get frustrated as teachers. Tell me about it. Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. It's a huge problem. The approach I've taken has been to pose challenges that people care about or find interesting or both. And it's a little bit of a kind of getting the message along with something that's so compelling that people sort of have to learn how to do it. So for people who are interested in history, I use a lot of reference to digital news archives. For people who find the image space really interesting, I try to come up with problems that are relevant to them there. If this was a class that I was doing with lawyers in person, I would probably be referring to case law. So for example, one of the things I didn't mention is that Google Scholar has an extensive collection of case law and judgments and all that sort of stuff is in Google Scholar, but it's only United States law. It doesn't cover Canada. It doesn't cover any other part of the world. That's a whole interesting topic about when will we get the rest of the world. But the world's legal code and judgments and decisions is a big space. So I think the bottom line, though, Mike, is that what we have to do is be interesting, have interesting problems, and in the process, those questions will carry the message of how to get people to use these skills and tools more effectively. Okay, let me see if anybody else. Another question. I heard a rumor that Google Translate English to French was improved by using Supreme Court of Canada decisions. Do you know if that's true? Yeah, it actually is true. The reason is interesting because the way we train Google Translate is that we look for parallel texts. And Canada happens to have a fantastic resource of all these parallel texts. So the French-English parallel texts appear in a lot of the documents, and so we're able to point our machine learning algorithms at that, and they've taken advantage. So I don't know if it's particularly the Supreme Court, but it was definitely Canadian legal decisions and legal documents that have helped out a lot. Let's see. Lots of comments about how to use the markers. Okay. Dr. Russell, I use Bitly versus Google.gl. Yeah, it's usually, truthfully, I use Bitly because rather than Goo.gl, because Goo.gl does not allow me to assign strings. And remembering 6 characters that are randomly chosen is really hard. Whereas when I do a Bitly link, I can give it, Dan/IRE-2007 or whatever. And so I can assign those names, and they're much more memorable, and they're a lot easier to type. Trust me. I've done it in a lot of classes where people are looking at the Goo.gl. What is it? Is that an L or a 1 or an I? I don't know. And so that's why I use Bitly usually. Let's see. Anything else? Okay. How can I vote for my favorite moment? Okay. Let's do that. All right. All right. I'm going to call it there. It's been a pleasant hour chatting to you. I hope you learned something. My email is in there, and if you can't find my email, you can Google me. I'll let you figure out how to do that. In the meantime, it's been my pleasure. Thanks again to the Manitoba Bar Association for hosting this event, and I'll say goodbye. It's been wonderful.